Hi, my name is Rick, and this is Burn After Reading. This is about the unfortunate toxicity of the Maura Murray case. Before I get started, let me be clear right off the bat. I do not have any involvement with the Murray family, her friends, investigators, or law enforcement. I'm just an observer. If you are unaware of the Maura Murray case, go to www.MauraMurrayMissing.org. If you would like a deep dive into the case, I highly recommend the 107 Degree podcast at www.the107degree.com. Of course, I will provide links below. I would also like to share why I picked the name Burn After Reading. It's a movie, I guess you can call it a black crime film. It was written, produced, and edited and directed by Joel and Ethan Cohen. It follows a recently jobless CIA analyst who misplaced memoirs are found by a pair of dim-witted gym employees. When they mistake the memoirs for classified government documents, they undergo a series of misadventures in an attempt to profit from their find. Sound familiar? I mean, just even a little bit? Many odd and bizarre characters were born from this incident. I feel many of the characters could come straight from that movie. Everyone from a government conspiracy-believing private eye lying about law enforcement credentials, a self-serving, spurned journalist, an author who believes it's all about him, an armchair detective who thinks he knows who the killer is 100% and claims to have proof, but his proof comes from a troll email. People like this think they are the hero. They stick out their chests like superheroes and claim it's all for Maura, when in fact it's about, in my opinion, it's about their own self-seeking agenda along with a little bit of money and fame to go along with it. Speaking of trolls, they have unfortunately helped steer the narrative. Emails of fake coordinates of where Maura Murray's body is, videos of a creepy guy laughing during an anniversary of her disappearance, and subliminal messages showing a barn implying a possible crime scene. The list of troll activities, they just go on and on and on. There's a lot of things I'd like to cover and discuss, but today I'd like to talk about James Renner. He's a journalist, author, and blogger who has aggressively injected himself into the Maura Murray story. He wrote a book, against the family's wishes, may I add, and because of that made them negative subjects in it, especially Fred Murray, Maura's father. Currently, Julie, one of Maura's older sisters, is a subject of his rage due to drama with two other people that James is feuding with. Two people who have had, and these two people have had more involvement with the family than he has, which I think plays a big part of that, in my opinion. He believes in some part that Julie is responsible for actions, be they valid or not. He believes that she's the one that can control that. Of course, Julie feels differently. She feels that she can't control everybody. She's not responsible for them. I feel that attacking the Maura family is cruel, irresponsible, and heartless. By doing this, he fans the flames of his followers. Some of those followers falsely deduct that the family doesn't care about finding her. Out of all the comments on Facebook that he deletes, those still remain. But he wants to talk about other people's responsibilities and what they're responsible for. So I want to read a review of his book on Goodreads. It was written by someone named Sara 3 years ago. I believe what she wrote is far just better articulated than how I could characterize Renner. I will also link the review below. Now, please forgive me, especially if I stumble through the words a bit. I'm new to all of this. I'm sharing this because I believe anyone new to this should be aware of James Renner's tactics, and that I, along with many others, believe he does not have the investigation's best interest at heart. That goes double for Maura and her family. He does not have their interest at heart, only his own. So here we go. When you first see James Renner, a few things become clear right off the bat. He's a tense guy. His forehead seems almost permanently wrinkled, and his eyes fairly radiate with a gaze that's halfway between a puppy that just peed on the carpet and a guy who knows the girl he just asked to the prom is going to say no. He seems like a guy who bites his lip a lot and has a tendency to ask if you're mad at him in that annoying way that eventually makes you mad at him because he won't stop asking. Mind you, I've never met the guy, but since it doesn't stop Renner, I'm not sure why it should stop me. I've got plenty of photos of the guy, and I've read tons of stories from other people on the internet who have had friends who talked to him or were like in the same zip code he was in at one time. I mean, hot damn, that practically makes us related. That's basically the entire basis of the colossal trash heap of his book. Renner sitting at a computer, making one insane leap of logic after another, and judging everyone he encounters often solely on the basis of whether or not they'll consent to be interviewed. Sounds pretty bad, even for me, doesn't it? But you guys remember my rules, right? I'll try my damnedest to stick to the book and not vilify the author unless I seriously believe he or she is a dangerous person doing dangerous things that can or already are hurting people. Then all bets are off. James Renner wants to be special. You can almost see the things he must dream about at night. He's the first one the news outlets call when there's a missing persons case to consult on. He's the first one the shocked and grieving families call for counsel when their child vanishes like a puff of smoke. He's the one who makes that fateful connection no one else could ever see and makes the connection. There are pictures of him with his fingers wrapped around some sleazebag shirt collar as he puts the guy up against the wall, and the headlines read, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist nabs serial murdering pedophile single-handedly. And Scotland Yard and FBI in bidding war to make Renner head of elite missing persons task force. Or he's moving through the shadows of some dim back alley. He is not the law. He is above the law. The rules do not apply to someone like him, someone who moves through the world among everyday normal people with a secret rage, the likes of which the world has never known. If he did, well, let's just say Renner wouldn't blame them for crossing the street when they see him coming. He stalks the worst, most devious sinners, and he brings them to justice. Kind of like Batman. His brand of justice. And sure, it's grisly and stories have to be made up and things need to be brushed under the carpet when the people in charge see what he's done to yet another deserving child rapist. But he gets the job done. James Renner wants to be special so very badly. But he just isn't. His latest book is not an absorbing dual investigation into the disappearance of this poor girl and a look at the equally mysterious and incredibly deep mind of the reporter determined to solve her case. It's actually a lot of insane-sounding drivel written by a very sad, abusive, semi-functioning alcoholic drug addict who wants you to notice him. To give the uninitiated some background on Maura Murray, she was a college student at the University of Massachusetts who in the winter of February 2004 got into a car accident in New Hampshire and simply vanished into thin air. She's since become a bit of a siren song for true crime buffs. Armchair sleuths around the globe debate that what may have happened to her on blogs and Reddit threads, the same way that they talk about D.B. Cooper and the Zodiac Killer. They come up with theories and float ideas, and sometimes someone finds a weird email or makes a connection. It's harmless because 95% of the time these people understand that while Maura might be a bit of an urban myth, she's also a very real person with a group of very real family and friends who miss her dearly. And then James Renner. Enter stage left with all of the theatrical and overdramatic grandstanding that he can muster. According to this self-styled reporter, who's not actually reporting for anyone but himself, he became obsessed, and that's his words, not mine, with Maura's case while getting a lap dance from a stripper who tells him about the time someone murdered her sister. Let that one sit a minute, shall we? That's not a joke, and nor is the first time Renner has felt what he'd probably call divine intervention. And I would call the voices in his head directing him to help a missing girl. The very first line in the book jacket describes an 11-year-old Renner falling in love with a 10-year-old Amy Mahalovic when he first saw her missing poster. Okay. Now, Amy would eventually be found horribly murdered, and her killer remains at large to this day. Though Renner totally knows who did it, of course, and in his other book about Amy, he talks about that. But don't read that one either. So where were we? Okay, so he gets a lap dance from a magical muse disguised as a stripper and decides he's going to find Maura. Obviously, the first time he should do that, of course, is to stand outside of her dorm like a creepy stalker. And of course, following that plan to its logical conclusion, he should, get blithering drunk the way that it was speculated Maura might have been, and retrace her route in his car, because he once read an article where a guy said there's a 20% chance we're living in a computer simulation, and his plan will obviously cause a glitch in the matrix wherein he will see what happened to Maura. That is, and I'm not kidding, this is how his investigation begins. Like he did with Amy, he starts a blog about Maura, and for a while it becomes a magnet for tips, theories, and discussion about Maura's disappearance. People are impressed with him. He's keeping Maura in the public eye. He's helping. Like, he's legitimately helping, and I'm acknowledging that. And then it all starts to go horribly wrong. Renner's biggest problem is he can't bear not to be part of the story he's supposed to be objectively reporting. He cannot bear the thought that he isn't part of the narrative. He has to make Amy and Maura about him. The roller coaster starts to fall when no one actually connected with Maura wants anything to do with him. This can't possibly be because of his interview style, showing up unannounced at their homes and places of business and saying things like, "Well, maybe the police would like to know you wouldn't talk to an investigator about Maura's disappearance." Or his remarked upon tendency to come off as an obsessive asshole when he's questioning people. Clearly, it's because they all have something to hide from this master of deductive reasoning and the seer into the souls of the guilty. We're treated to Renner's reporting on Fred, Maura's father, who was clearly carrying on a secret incestuous relationship with his daughter. Ew. Her sister, Kathleen, is a drug addict and alcoholic who won't talk to him because of her brushes with the law. Her friends are all being warned off and threatened to stay away from Renner because obviously he's getting too close to the answers. Oh, and Maura? She's a sociopath. And so a pattern emerges. If you don't want to talk to Renner, you must have had something to do with Maura's disappearance, or some other heinous, totally made-up crime which is clearly connected to Maura somehow. He defames so many of Maura's friends and relations based on nothing but his own insane theories and third and fourth party accounts from people who didn't even know Maura. I don't know how this book even gets classified as nonfiction, let alone true crime. Renner doesn't report. He makes up stories. Ridiculous, hurtful stories, with not one spot of evidence to support him. He'd argue that, of course, he has plenty of proof of some utter accusations that he spouts out as they occur to him. Proof like, well, some guy on the internet told me. Seriously, that's his proof. Some random person on the internet tells him that the crash, as it has been recorded by the authorities, couldn't possibly have happened the way they say it happened, and suddenly the only answer is that clearly Maura was being followed by a second car that speared her away to a new life in Canada. Right. Chapter after chapter is devoted to similar logical theories intermixed with Renner's own life, which is going so far off the rails, I'm surprised he's not sitting either in prison or in a mental ward right now. We're treated to lovely stories about his adventures, about his 4-year-old, how they're running out of ideas of how to correct his behavioral problems, and the hours he spends self-medicating his perfectly normal depression and anxiety with drugs and alcohol. Then there's the chapter where he assaults a police officer and goes to jail. Then he goes to visit his grandfather, who sexually abused all the women in his family. He has what he calls frightening encounters with his various suspects, where he more or less just like flies somewhere and then tracks some poor person down just so that he can look them in the eye. I think all of this is supposed to be amazingly insightful and like a window into his soul or some shit like that. I was supposed to marvel at his amazingly fucked up life and ponder how no one has ever had a more dysfunctional family or a more tragic childhood. It's like he's yelling, "See how similar it is to Maura and Amy? See? Do you see?" About halfway through his this thing, disguised as true crime, Maura's family has had about enough, of Fred being called an incestuous child molester and Maura being called a sociopath and an all-around terrible person, and makes a public statement on their Facebook page basically begging Renner to stop. This hurts this guy's feelings. It really does. Why don't they understand he's the only one who can save her? Why? What has he done that's so terrible? You hear that? That's called irony. Or sarcasm. But up until the last pages of his book, I was going to give him a pass. Yeah, he's a mediocre writer and an even worse investigator. By his own account, he's a terrible father and a worse husband who has no business judging anyone's drugs, alcohol, or family problems. But up until those last few pages, that's all he was. Just another asshole who wants his 15 minutes of fame. Then he did something that I don't think any decent person can reasonably forgive. I'm going to quote it directly because I think anyone considering reading this book should know what kind of man this guy really is. This comes from page 268, literally 2 pages from the epilogue. He's remarking, yet again, about how the family won't talk to him. But I am at a loss to explain their behavior. They do not want this book written. It is clear to me that they are no longer actively looking for Maura. Let that sit for a minute. Because these poor people who have lost their daughter, their sister, their friend, this person they loved, this person they have to spend every day of their lives wondering if she's being tortured or raped or if she's met some grisly end they'll never know about because they don't want to talk to this parasite. Well, that must mean they don't want to find her. They don't care, and they're not looking anymore because they won't talk to this utter douchebag of a person. I hope to God none of them read this book. I hope to God someday they find some kind of peace with the terrible tragedy that is surely part of every second of every day of their lives. But as long as people like Renner exist, I have little hope they'll ever find anything like closure. Renner compares himself to be a lot smarter, better people in this book, but I think the best comparison is one I know without a doubt he'll hate. To me, he most closely resembles poor old Willie Loman, Arthur Miller's tragic salesman who remembers better days that probably never were when he was a big deal and people knew his name and the mayor shook his hand. He's the guy who wakes up in the garage with a hose passed through the window of his car but can't remember how it got there. And just like Mr. Loman, the attention must be paid. Attention must be paid, and he does not care what he has to do to get it. So that's it for today. If you by chance happen to be listening to this, and if some off chance you think there's a tip that, be it small or large, is beneficial, please report it to the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit. You can call them at 603-271-2663 or email them coldcaseunit@dos.nh Of course, I will provide links below, so you can do that. Of course, if you want to respond or you want to give it to the Maura Murray family instead, and they can give it to the New Hampshire cold case, you can give it to them by emailing them at MauraMurrayFamilyDirect@gmail.com, and I'll provide other links below. If you somehow found your way to the end of this, I am very thankful that you took the time to listen. This stuff, it's toxic, unfortunately. I believe it deserves attention only because of the misdirection and the narrative steering that's been happening. So, that's it. Thank you.